Well, thanks so much, Jonathan, for joining me today. Really excited to chat about, what you're working on, what the team is working on with Creator Cabins and everything that's going on with the idea and the vision. But maybe take us back just through the ideation process and maybe the journey of just thinking about this endeavor and maybe what were those first conversations like?
There's a lot of it depends on how far back you want to go, really. In some sense, I feel like this project has brought together a lot of pieces of my past and other people's past who have been working on it in some unexpected ways. I mean, you can go all the way back to the fact that I was born and raised in Austin and grew up, going out into the hill country, and that was my first real exposure to nature and camping. I kind of fell in love with the Texas Hill Country, and then the first job I ever wanted when I was a kid was to be an architect. I spent a lot of time with like these late 90s like architectural software CD-ROMs, like building houses for my family and babysitters and stuff.
Classic.
Then by the time I got to middle school, was very interested in online communities and became a very active lurker and member of early Reddit and Dig and message boards. I was a super nerdy kid, so I was really spent a lot of time on the Science Olympiad message boards. Anyway, so that was a thread that was really important to me. And then after college, ended up getting together a couple of my college buddies and trying to start what at the time was essentially a token gated online community, though we weren't using the words token gated at the time.
Sure.
And it also was a terrible time to build that. It was like right as Facebook was pretty dominant there, and nobody was really interested in joining like obscure paid online communities. And so that didn't really work out, and I decided I needed to go spend some time figuring out how real startups worked, and ended up applying to a
Yeah.
bunch of places and went to Instacart, spent 6 years there working on and leading product teams on the shopper side of the platform, learned a lot about gig work, thought a lot about how to build software for gig workers and how the decreasing transaction costs of software were going to really change the way that people worked. And then got kind of burnt out on web 2, ended up
Sure.
on a vacation that my boss mandated I take to go figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Ended up on a little island off the coast of Thailand, and thought a lot about things for about a month. And I can look back to those old journal entries. I think that's where a lot of the actual story of cabin starts, and the desire to go out and build a cabin in the woods and kind of get away from it all. And then started spending a lot of time with independent online creators. Some of them came out to the cabin after it was finished, and that's when we started the DAO.
Interesting. So so you had a cabin sort of built already, and that was kind of the home base for this
Yeah,
sort of
so
idea and then evolution off of that.
exactly. Yeah, so it was actually, there was a group called the Creator Co-op, and we were a group of people who had mostly met through the internet, Twitter, and an online course called Rite of Passage, and had accrued some other members, and we were kind of meeting weekly, and we were all pursuing independent online creator careers, and we were essentially a support group. And that was the first folks who I invited out to the cabin when we finished building it. It was supposed to be a week-long trip. Some people stayed for a week. A couple people ended up staying for an extra week, and we were just like so pumped and excited about what we were thinking about and working on. Some folks stuck around to kind of put together the idea for what became CabinDAO.
Yeah, and I think when you first kind of discover it and kind of read through what's happening, I think you really did a great job just right on the website. A decentralized city built by creators for creators. There's a lot of cool words there, but like let's kind of break down what that really means and sort of the vision of cabin and maybe what you visualize it being. I know there's a lot going on here kind of down the road in the roadmap, but like at its core level, let's kind of talk about what the vision is kind of right now, and maybe what are you working on executing kind of right now for it in the overall.
We're building a decentralized city. for online creators. And what that means is that we believe that cities are built around the dominant technology of the era. And if you look at most of the cities that we live in now, they're mostly built around cars, and they were mostly built over the last couple hundred years around automobiles. And there aren't a whole lot of new cities forming, which is kind of weird if you actually think about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And there certainly aren't a lot of like new models for cities. And that's especially weird because we've got these incredible new technologies like the internet and computers and blockchains. And it's our belief that, over the next couple hundred years, a lot of new types of cities are going to be formed around this new set of technologies. And for us, what that means is, the internet is interesting because you don't have to be in the same place as other people. You can connect with anyone in the world. And so, we believe what that means for cities is that you're going to have these pockets of physical nodes, like the place that I'm sitting in right now out in the Texas Hill Country, that will be connected via the internet, via a shared culture and possibly shared governance. To a bunch of other nodes around the world, and that DAOs are kind of an ideal organizational form for the mesh network of location nodes for these decentralized cities.
I guess when we say like decentralized cities, is it the point to just come together and kind of, talk about things, right? And come up with like just ideation, or are there like practical real world things that will be determined, right, by these nodes everywhere that I guess perhaps own that plot of land where their node is, or something like that? I guess go a little deeper into, I guess, what the citizens of the city, if you will, the nodes, right, will actually like do or want to build.
Well, look, first of all, these things are, of course, the saying is that Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're certainly not trying to build decentralized cities in a day either. And I think that the most important thing is that these places are co-created with the community. And so I wouldn't begin to provide an accurate picture of where this will end up, because I don't think anyone really knows yet. And we all have to figure it out together. But I can provide a little bit more of a detailed sketch of what this might look like. We see this as a multi-decade, multi-century project. And so we have to figure out where to start now.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And
that's the hardest part, right?
Right. We have to exactly figure out what to do now. So we started, with this node 0, this property out in the hill country, started building cabins out here, and now we're slowly carving out trails through the woods on this 28-acre property, and putting in parks and bringing folks from the DAO out for build weeks where we decide, as a group what we want to build and what we want to see more of, and then we make it happen. And then, if you think about the sort of evolution of the people coming out, I think we'll just continue to test larger configurations of numbers of people for lengths of time. There's a great Balaji diagram of this, of like the sort of development of what he called cloud cities, where on one axis you have the number of people, on the other axis you have the amount of time. And people have had explorations of pulling together groups from the internet at pretty small scales for pretty short periods of time, but that'll continue to grow. And we want to just test out a bunch of those configurations. And we think the best way to do that right now in 2022 is to focus our roadmap on building an embassy for DAOs. And we think the magic of getting together IRL is, being with people who you have met online or have interacted with online, but haven't spent a lot of time with in person. And we're DAO people, and we know and like DAO people. And so we're inviting groups of DAO people, both DAOs that want to come out here for retreats, as well as groups of ambassadors from across DAOs out to the property to spend time here and get to know each other, help us all plant the seeds of this city.
So it's going to be a DAO capital.
The word capital is kind of interesting because it implies like a level of centralization, perhaps. And so
right.
I don't know that there will ever really be a capital for this city, but there will be nodes that are sort of optimized for different things. And I think what we're optimizing for in this node is a big piece of nature that is a place where people can come together for retreats and gatherings. But we expect that there may be nodes in the future that take very different form factors. Maybe there will be
Sure.
a castle in Scotland or Lisbon. Maybe there will be a skyscraper in Manhattan. I think we're open to the idea that that these nodes can look and feel pretty differently, and that actually creates a diversity of experience that allows people eventually, as we stitch them together, to travel around to different nodes, and ideally in the future, have people who are kind of living full time across the nodes.
Really, really interesting. We talk about the word, DAO a lot, and it's kind of in the ether of a lot of the world now. It's kind of popping up everywhere, right? And I see a lot of people doing them, trying to do them, starting them up, and it's really interesting, and it's incredible. But I think the one thing I really enjoyed about what you're up to is that the execution of it can be very difficult, right? To actually execute on the NFT part of things, for some type of pass, of verification and ownership, to raising money in a DAO treasury. There's all these sort of phases that a DAO to go through to actually execute on its sort of vision. Can you just maybe walk us through the journey of the execution of it via, what do the NFTs do? How'd you raise the money for the treasury? I believe it was on Mirror, but really just the executable phases of, you say, your group got together and say, hey, okay, we're going to officially do this. We're going to make it a DAO. What were the first steps sort of after that to execute on that vision of the DAO?
Yeah, great question. Look, executing as a DAO is hard. Is certainly,
Yeah.
getting a bunch of people to work together in a decentralized fashion is not something that we have a ton of experience with, given the kind of default state of organizations today.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're all trying to learn as we go. In our case, I think the key insight was to have this grand vision that people could get excited about, that we all wanted to build this decentralized city, but then to focus on the most tactical, tangible versions of that we could at any given moment. And so when the group came out here, the Creator Co-op group that ended up starting the DAO, we were sitting around the campfire one night, kind of thinking about it. We'd just seen Mirror had just launched their crowdfunding tool, and we were kind of talking about what it could look like to use that tool for something and to experiment with it. And we ended up deciding that we were all independent online creators, and we were all excited about the idea of creator residencies, giving people the liminal time and space to work on a project without a lot of outside pressures. And so we ended up creating this Mirror crowdfund to where people contributed essentially a donation and got a governance token to help select groups of residents to come out for these cohorts. And that was the original intent. We weren't even necessarily calling it a DAO at that point. It was like this single program that we wanted to run and sort of see how some of the crowdfunding and governance tools worked, and what we could do to support online creators. And then, as we started running that program, we were noticing that a lot of really amazing people were showing up in the community and wanting to contribute. And so over the course of the first cohorts of the residency program, which became season 1, we had this emergent process of people showing up in the community and us kind of figuring out what we wanted to do next, and what we wanted to plan for season 2, which we're in now, which is sort of has taken on this vision of multiplayer mode and bringing together groups of people, whether that's DAOs coming for retreats or the ambassador program or these build weeks. I think it's just important to have the big vision, focus on like the most tangible specific thing, and then let the community be the group determining and sort of emerging the next phase out of the last one.
It's really interesting. You talked about governance tokens. Do the cohorts themselves need to, I guess, own an NFT to come on a cohort, or is that the sort of governance? Whoever owns governance token get the vote on. People submit, I guess, hey, I would like to be, I would like to come on one of the cohorts, be a member of the cohort, and then they sort of apply, and then they sort of get invited to do
Right.
so for that? I guess how is the cohort, I guess, two sort of decided?
So for season one, for our first season, it was exactly what you were just describing. We distributed these cabin tokens, which gave people governance abilities to select applicants for residencies in these cohorts. And so we had an open application process on Twitter actually, and then allowed token holders to vote, brought out these incredible cohorts of creators. And that was how season one worked. And then we realized, while it was very cool to have a bunch of people who had never met before, even mostly online, come out and spend time together, we thought it would be even potentially more powerful to try getting groups of people who did know each other online but hadn't spent a lot of time together
Right.
IRL
Right.
out for season two. And so that's when we developed our passports and our NFT visas for those passports. So I'm actually I'm holding a physical card in my hand right now, which is our cabin passport. It's the size of a credit card, and it has a chip embedded in it, and it
Okay.
has a wallet, a private key on
Huh.
that chip. And we also, we've been building this NFT based product for membership and access. And so what we can do is, we've been selling essentially these visas to come spend a week at the cabin. And then we're giving people that come out these physical cards that then serve as their ongoing passport and are a wallet that can hold, future NFTs that provide access to
Hmm.
parts of the network. And so, yeah, we're very excited about that form factor as a way to bridge the on-chain world into the offline world.
This is, yeah, I mean, this is like exactly why I was excited to talk to you, because I think looking at the digital world and finding a way to bring it into the physical world, unlike anything we've kind of had before. I mean, obviously there's like meetups, right? And there's Facebook groups, right? There's been these tools out there to sort of get people together from online and bring them into the real world environment. The interesting thing about all this, right? Taking, let's just call it Web3 into the physical world, I think, is just the opportunity to physically, be involved in a community again. It's actually, it seems like it's I don't know, it's kind of been a while. Like, I have friends and online people that I've never met before, right? Like, I've been friends with 4 or 5 years, right? Like, close friends, and just kind of never, you just never, if you find the time, or like they live halfway around the world, right? And so there's expenses to that, and then COVID. So there's all these things that prevent us from being in the real world together. But so many things happen in the real world when you're together, and I'm sure you see it when you sit down, with members coming out, and you sit there physically with people, the ideation that can happen, what things get brought up. I guess talk about just what that experience has been like for you, to kind of like physically sit down with people and really ideate on things, listen to what they're talking about, helping them perhaps solve problems. I guess, what do you see the differences from, being part of a community online versus being part of a community offline, now that you've kind of done, at least one cohort?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that online and offline are good for very different things. So online is great for, breadth and connecting with sort of exactly the right people from a huge pool of possible people.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you look at, like, online dating is the perfect example of this, where you have an
Hmm.
incredibly highly motivated group of people that are looking for other individuals.
Yeah.
And they, if you look at the graphs of like how people meet their partners over time, it's just stunning to see everything else that has been the traditional ways people have done that has fallen off a cliff, and online dating is through the roof. And the reason for that is because the pool of people is just so much bigger, and you can be so much more precise about sort of finding the right person or people to match with. And the same is true on Twitter or any online community. It just allows this level of like niche interest and connection that's not available within the limits of physical geography. So that's what online is great for. What it's not great for is deep connections, because we've all spent the past couple of years on Zoom, and that's fine for some things, but you pretty much have to have like a specific meeting agenda and purpose to hop on a half-hour Zoom call. And the magic of physical space is the liminal time and space that it allows for creativity and collaboration and exploration and trust and relationship building. And so, if you think about even Cabin as an example, we never would have started Cabin, I think, through the online community, the Creator Co-op. We had to get together in person and be sitting around a campfire late one night and kind of shooting the shit and allowing our creative juices to flow. And I think that's the sort of ideal situation, is that you meet people online and then you get together offline for deep relationship building, trust building, and big, meaty, important creative work, strategy work, etc. And so that's what we're trying to help groups optimize for.
And it's really interesting when you bring, creators together. Usually really cool things can be built, right? And
Yeah.
because you kind of have the tools, the human capital there to kind of actually execute on it, right? Ideas are great, but execution is everything, right? It's often the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to, do that sitting alone in your house, even if you're connected to people online. I think that we're going to move probably to a world increasingly. We're already starting to see this where, we're going to be hybrid, but not hybrid in the way that people think or are talking about, right? Like the kind of standard definition of hybrid work now is this sort of like a couple days in the office, a couple days at home, and some people are on video and some people are IRL. And that's like the worst of all worlds. I think what you actually want is a type of hybrid where for 90% of the time, you can live anywhere and work at any time, and it's all remote and asynchronous. And then 10% of the time, you're coming together with the group of people who you work with in a physical location and spending time bonding and doing that deep creative and strategy work.
Really well said. You had mentioned the NFT passport. How do we? It looks like this might be the first product that sort of the DAO is kind of building out. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that more, where I guess other communities can use this tool? This is where I see the power in what you've created, right? Is that you created something that's now creating other things for other creators to use. And I think we see communities popping up online kind of everywhere, in every different sector, every different niche. But talk about how, I guess, the service now, a product that you guys are building out, how can that serve the community of communities, if you will? People can take this idea and implement it into maybe what they want to do, right? With their community, within their sector, within their city, or wherever they may be.
Yeah, so we're definitely interested in doing that. And I think that, the way we're doing that is exactly what you just described, which is that we're building products first and foremost for ourselves. And then due to the fact that we are, sort of on the bleeding edge of a lot of DAO stuff, particularly related to the kind of like on-chain to offline conversion. We think that's an area where we can not only build cool products for ourselves, but also provide those to other people, other groups, other DAOs. And that is true for our products, which includes things like the NFT passport visas, and some other software products we're working on, like a kind of Hacker News for DAOs product that we'll be releasing soon. But also, is true for our written content and the media that we're creating as a DAO. So we have a product guild. We also have a media guild. The media guild has been incredibly active in publishing content about how to DAO, and really diving deeply into the execution of how to make DAOs functional. And we're also spinning up a podcast right now. So and then of course we're bringing together groups of DAO operators IRL to talk about these things. And so I think our biggest goal right now is just to accelerate the GDP of the DAO economy, and we're trying to do that every way we can by taking all of the learnings from what we're doing and sharing them out with the rest of the DAO ecosystem.
And DAOs are so early on here, right? So there's going to be a lot of transformation over time. And I kind of maybe want to focus the last couple questions here on not necessarily maybe the future of DAOs, but perhaps kind of where we are like structurally. You're kind of I mean, you're in Austin, so you're kind of in a city where it seems to be proactive in perhaps supporting innovative, companies and ideas. Wyoming just has I guess they actually have a legal DAO structure now, and some states are paying attention. I guess from like just I don't know necessarily a legal standpoint, but where do we go from here for DAOs as they mature? I guess, do you see much more of a natural formulation of, again, not regulation, but just like, forms of ways to actually do it where there's a guidebook to it, like you said, how to DAO, right? There's some formation sort of paperwork, or not paperwork, but things you fill out, or a software stack that is sort of universally used to kind of get set up. And I know there's all these set products out there right now for DAOs, but where do you see it going maybe within the next 3 to 5 years? And guess what needs to get better right now? I know that's a very loaded question, a lot of different ways you can go with that, but try if you
Yeah,
can.
that is certainly a big question. I'll maybe try to cover a couple of pieces of it. So, first of all, I think there's not one type of DAO. There are
Yeah.
many types of DAOs. And so there's not going to be one tech stack, there's not going to be one answer, one legal structure, one organizational structure that works across the board. There, in the same way that companies have many
Yeah.
structures, DAOs will and do too. And I think it's important that we get better at kind of classifying those different types of structures and developing language to talk about the dimensions or the spectra across which DAOs operate. But it's 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 going to be a wide spectrum in terms of DAO tooling. I think there is definitely there are a lot of fantastic teams starting to build really great products in this space. It is nascent for sure, and it requires pretty different mental models and software models, monetization models to build DAO tooling versus most traditional kind of Web 2 SaaS
Right.
software.
Right.
And so I think it's going to take a while for us to figure all that stuff out. But there are definitely a lot of amazing teams and entrepreneurs starting to really think deeply about the problem space and create great solutions. And I think that the most important thing that can happen right now, that why we're so focused on this idea of an embassy for DAOs and growing the GDP of the DAO ecosystem, is bringing together DAO operators and leaders and community managers and folks who are very involved in running and supporting DAOs into the same place to talk about the problems and to try to figure these things out, because everything from organizational structure to compensation to how to set up your Discord to how to perform governance are all really big, hard, meaty problems that don't have clear solutions. And the only real way to solve them is just to spend a lot of time experimenting across a bunch of DAOs and then kind of learning the best patterns that different DAOs have implemented and trying those out and continuing to evolve the structure of these things.
DAO University seems inevitable with the ever-changing road. I want to end on the last question. I know it's a little tough to look at the future a little bit, but just from a cabin perspective and what you and the team are building, when you look at maybe successes that you would like to have, again, going back to sort of like execution over the next maybe 3 to 5 years, like what would you like to execute on, and how would you measure success?
So if I look back in 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be really happy if we've done a couple things. The first one is just taken really tangible steps towards a decentralized city. And I think that this is the sort of thing where I think there's a great, possibly Bill Gates quote, something about people sort of like overestimate what can happen in 1 year and underestimate what can happen in 10 years. And I think people are probably dramatically underestimating what DAOs are capable over the next decade.
Yeah.
And I think we're already starting to see this emerge in the context of Cabin, where we have a whole lot of people who are working, kind of part-time or in their spare time on the DAO, completing bounties or, doing various things within the DAO. And so as a result, any individual kind of project or action that we're taking runs a little bit slower maybe than if there were a full-time team working on it.
Right.
But
Right.
as a result of having this huge community of people running in a bunch of different directions and trying out a bunch of different things, we're sort of like a parallel processing computer where we can just try a bunch of things simultaneously. I think this is one of the big advantages that DAOs have, is that as transaction costs decrease, you can basically bring together groups of loosely coordinated people in new ways. And there's actually a pretty strong economic sort of theory underpinning this, which is Ronald Coase's Nature of the Firm, which says that like companies really shouldn't exist in pure economic theory. And the only reason they do exist is because of high transaction costs. And so as software lowers transaction costs, you can get a lot more people who are sort of loosely affiliated and working on things part-time. And as a result, you have this huge network of people with low transaction costs. You can actually run in a bunch of different directions simultaneously, experiment with a ton of different things, and kind of see what works. And so as a result, even though each individual action might be moving a little slower, the overall organization can move very quickly. And I think we're starting to see this at Cabin. And so I think as a result, what I would expect over the next, say, 5 years is that not only will we be able to continue to grow this first node as an embassy for DAOs and as a place where incredible defining moments in the DAO ecosystem continue to happen, but also that we will be able to rapidly onboard new nodes and have an actual functional decentralized city across the world that people can start to travel around to and explore and be a part of different sort of subcultures and communities within the broader network.
It's incredible, my man. Congrats on all the progress so far and the execution so far. Thanks so much for joining me. I know you're busy, and I'm always grateful when busy people take time out of their day building cool stuff. So congratulations and best of luck to the next decade, my man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.